Good evening. I apologize for my handwriting. My name is William Penniman.
That's my, excuse me, sir.
In any event, I'm a Reston resident. I've lived in all the other suburbs of Northern Virginia too, but I live in Reston now. I have lots of experience with toll roads and with traffic on Route 66. I also spent 4 years studying transportation and transit-oriented development on a task force on Reston. I will say the one bright spot in transportation in Northern Virginia was the arrival of the Silver Line out to Reston. I'm here tonight to urge you to emphasize, strongly emphasize, the need for multimodal transportation, both inside and outside the Beltway. In that connection, you should delay widening the highways as long as possible, both inside and outside. Widening does not solve the problem. Widening simply moves more traffic from the outer suburbs to create worse congestion in the inner suburbs. Nobody's ever going to widen the Teddy Roosevelt Bridge or Constitution Avenue, nor are they going to widen all the streets of Arlington and Falls Church. So you're just making the problem worse for somebody else. Multimodal transportation means improving bus service and the like and roads to the subway stations, and where possible extending the subways out. This is principally the Orange Line and the Silver Line. It means improving the frequency and speed of buses moving on Route 66 coming in, which means dedicated lanes and keeping single occupancy vehicles out of the way. To the extent you have them, they need to be subject to tolls during peak periods. And you also need to encourage the development of transit-oriented development, which is ultimately going to be the solution to the problem, not throwing more money at roads. Lastly, I want to say, you need to look at this problem in light of the looming problem of climate change, which is here and getting worse. Transportation is one of the major sources of CO2, which is driving climate change. It is generally recognized by the United States and by experts around the world that the U.S. is going to have to reduce its CO2 emissions by 80% by 2050. 80%. Continuing to say business as usual, we're just going to build more roads, is insane. It's going to be a waste of money for the long term, and it's going to encourage over-emission of CO2 in the meanwhile. So, multimodal transportation, mass transit in any form is the way to go, and stop building and expanding new roads. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Delegate Bob Marshall and then Kathy Marshall. Good evening, sir.
Mr. Secretary, starting with noticing the lack of a podium which would have been helpful to the public, I suggest that at least you all are consistent. You haven't helped the public in most of these efforts. When I asked you specifically what happened to the shoulder lanes, you never gave me an answer, even at a forum when you and I were talking across to each other. When I asked for the cost of the new bridges outside the Beltway, I received no cost figures. I received a letter from VDOT December 4th indicating that some of the records you have requested relating to projected cost for widening bridges are exempt to protect the negotiating position of VDOT. Therefore, these records are not being released. But when I looked at the two other attachments in the email, there were no records, not even for one lane on one bridge outside the Beltway. So am I to understand that all of the bridges are in fact under some renegotiation because you didn't give me any cost figures? When I asked with this same email for the origin of the $17 a day tolls, I received no answer other than a calculation that a third grader could have performed with with the aid of a calculator. That is not an answer. That is a deflection. When I asked for the cost of the tolls outside the Beltway, again, none were given, but you're proceeding full speed ahead. I asked that you come to areas and debate and vote in front of the people that you are affecting. Your response was to have a toll presentation in Danville for up here in 66, and you gave preliminary approval to these projects down in Virginia Beach. When I asked you point face to face, and your assistant, this young lady who was over here, why you haven't used the message boards to tell I-66 commuters that tolls are coming, I got nothing but a shoulder shrug. That's not acceptable. That's not candid. When I asked you how you went from 15 to 20 cents a mile in your own documents from 2013 and stating you would not toll existing lanes, To go to tolling existing lanes at 94.4 cents a mile, I met with silence. I wrote the state police. They do not agree with you that scofflaws are driving this. There's been a lack of candor and transparency and prudence. The press release that was WTOP had talked about, come to this CTB meeting tonight, on whether to let people driving alone during rush hours use I-66 inside the Beltway legally by paying a toll. That's not what you're doing. That's not all what you're doing. You talk about you're going to add 2 express lanes and 3 regular lanes in each direction. Really? There's going to be 8 lanes in both directions? This is highly misleading. We were able to drive in easily tonight because the little green light was on. And I thank you for that. If you want to find out where we're going to get some money to fix this, I would start with, don't spend the $50 million for the toll gantries. Take that $50 million and the $50 million that the governor wants to give to United Airlines and foreign airlines to drive the price down, and start paying for that lane that you said on WTOP's editorial would cost $100 million to fix. I'm assuming that you meant from 495 to Glebe Road.
Thank you, sir.
And I will offer an amendment to do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to that, sir. Yes, good evening, Miss Kathy Marshall, and then John Hoops. Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, Kathy Marshall, 40-year resident of Northern Virginia, most in Prince William County. Land use decisions ultimately impact transportation. As soon as the General Assembly widens a road, localities approve new developments which clog the roads again in a vicious cycle. In Prince William, one major road commuters must travel to get to 66 is 7 to 9 miles per hour in rush hour. Yet our county keeps approving thousands of residences which feed onto this already overburdened road. So I do understand you must deal with poor land use planning. You do have a hard job. About 30 years ago, a friend had an idea to build a new road through the middle of our county rather than to widen an existing road. My husband and I helped organize a citizens group to advocate for this much cheaper, less disruptive alternative which provided more east-west lanes. Every professional transportation planner opposed us. Eventually, the road we advocated for, the Prince William Parkway, was built, saving millions of taxpayers' dollars and hundreds of homes in the process. The moral of the story, ordinary citizens can have good ideas, and transportation experts should value their input. The CTB and VDOT have held numerous meetings at which over 95% of the public have expressed opposition to the I-66 toll plan, which will cost 10 times the tolls in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. But the CTB isn't listening. I-66 has already been paid for by taxpayers. Why should we pay for a toll for the same road we ride for free? Why should private companies take over Virginia roads or toll revenues spent on bike paths, walkways, and mass transit when we need another lane on I-66? How many bike riders will use bike paths to commute, and if so, at what cost per biker? Please don't ignore the overwhelming opposition of citizens to your toll plan. Keep in mind your job is to serve the people who pay your salaries. The taxpayers deserve your ear and your consideration. Ordinary citizens probably have many good suggestions. They have long been complaining about inadequate parking at Metro and VRE stations. Bus riders should be surveyed to find out how the routes can be made more convenient and efficient. Public complaints about the $1 million bus shelters that did not protect from the elements and the ill-fated streetcars were ignored for far too long, costing money that could have helped commuters. Ignoring public input breaks down trust between citizens and their government. If a new lane on 66 inside the Beltway costs $100 million, that is about a third of NVTA's annual revenue from the largest tax increase in Virginia's history, which was supposed to pay for transportation improvements.
I ask you to wrap up, please, Ms. Marshall.
Okay. How do you intend to inform I-66 commuters of impending $17 a day, $4,000 a year tolls? I hope that you are more transparent with the public. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. John Hoops, and then Fred Haynes. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir, Mr. Secretary, and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. I'd also like to thank Kathy Marshall. She introduced me to a certain extent. I represent an unusual demographic, as I live inside the Beltway in Annandale, and I worked for over 3 years in the Herndon area, so I was a reverse commuter. but I really dislike traffic around here, so I was an occasional bicycle rider out to the job in Herndon. And I greatly applaud the decision that the board has made to improve the multimodal side paths and improved crosswalks and connections across I-66 in this area. There may not be too many bicycle commuters that would be willing to ride 20 miles out to work, but there will be some. But it's absolutely critical to improve these bicycle connections and pedestrian connections so that people can make the connection safely between their metro and metro bus stations and their home. Now, as a bicycle commuter inside the Beltway, as I am right now, I have about an 8-mile ride. I would certainly welcome some additional improvements to bicycle connections along my route. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Fran Haynes and then Lance Haynes. Good evening, ma'am.
Hello. Thank you for letting me talk.
Sure.
I'm a 20-year Northern Virginia, 20-plus year Northern County resident. I've lived both inside and outside the Beltway. We currently live in Arlington. I'm opposed to this project for a couple of reasons. The main reason being traffic diversion. And I know Arlington County, that's a condition of theirs, and I haven't really seen anything that actually demonstrates addressing that concern. I also am a little suspicious because this is my third hearing, and I don't know, it sounds like another study has been done, but we've repeatedly asked for information to disaggregate any of the drive time improvements to break out how much is attributable to phase out of the hybrids, failure to enforce, how much is due to the expansion of I-66, and we've never gotten any answers. So I don't know if there's new data, but you can understand how the general public is very skeptical as to the need to toll when all of you know, as I know, that those are easily broken out in toll projections. So you can understand why we're a little suspicious. Finally, I think it's a really half-baked idea because even in places like London and Italy and all that, where they really have had to address really major urban traffic, I don't think we're anywhere near that, but those people at least have gotten down to the idea that you do have to accommodate tradespeople, taxis, airport access. None of that has been considered. And I tell you, tradespeople and taxis are important to society, and by these tolls and expanding the rush period, it is simply impossible for those people to come in without facing a gigantic cost after tax to come and provide those services. And furthermore, they are bringing their tools. They cannot commute. And I would suggest that you delay this project and put a little more thought into what is the right thing to do. I also have, so I'm not entirely negative, one suggestion. Okay. I feel like almost everybody agrees that there's a major enforcement problem, and it seems like there's an automatic logical leap that the only way to address this enforcement problem is to toll. I would suggest that we consider a bounty system, very similar to what is done with tow truck drivers, and I guarantee you get a grip real quick exactly what's going on. And that could be, and I bet you in a month you'd know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Lance Haynes and then Mike Morstein. Good evening, sir.
Hi, I'm a resident of Arlington, and I walk my dog between 6:30 and about 8:30 every morning, and I walk across the bridge over 66, and I look out and I see, I would say 70% of the cars are single passenger cars. I'm sure you're aware. They may be hybrids, let's say they are, which I don't think they all are. A lot of them are cheaters, as I'm sure you're aware. But, you know, if in 2017 the hybrid exclusion is going away, if that's still on the table, then the traffic during those rush hours is going to be significantly reduced. And if, I would say it would be 70% less. Now, if those hybrid owners now that have that exclusion and are driving legally, either carpool, HOV3, which would help a bunch, hopefully that happens, or, and this is the downside, use the other roads that's gonna cause much more traffic in our neighborhood.